Hello and welcome to the journal webinar series of the American Society of Agronomy, Crop Science Society of America, and Soil Science Society of America. This series features the latest research published in our society journals. I'm Emily Miller, the Journal Manager for Natural Sciences Education. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Introducing Humor in Online Teaching and Learning. Before we begin, I would like to note that questions can be entered in the question box, and the moderator will address them at the end of the presentation. This webinar will also be recorded, and the recording will be emailed to all attendees after the session. I'm happy to introduce our moderator today for the webinar, Dr. Justin Gardner. Dr. Gardner is an associate professor in the Department of Agriculture at Middle Tennessee State University. His research focuses on agricultural cooperatives and the scholarship of teaching and learning. He also currently holds the role of associate editor for the journal Natural Sciences Education.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to all the people who joined us today. It looks like we're up to 51 individuals in the webinar, so it's good to see a great crowd. As Emily mentioned, you can enter questions in the questions section, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Today's speaker is Dr. Andres Varjola. I hope I didn't slaughter your name too bad. Dr. Varjola is a forest engineer with experience in the forestry industry. He holds a PhD from the University of British Columbia and has devoted the past 12 years to teaching both undergraduate and graduate courses, covering a wide range of topics. This is a wide range of topics: forest management, remote sensing, hydrology, statistics, and professional development and computer applications. Today, Dr. Varjola will speak to how he found that inserting laugh tracks to pre-recorded videos during the pandemic lockdowns was a simple and effective teaching technique to enhance online learnings. His research and findings on this topic were recently published in Natural Sciences Education. Dr. Varjola, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Emily and Justin. It was a really interesting experience to prepare for this webinar, and I'm delighted to be here. Let's see how it goes. I want to share my experience in publishing this article. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is a bit of the contents of the article, and I would be really happy to have a nice conversation at the end rather than me just presenting all of these slides. Before we continue, I would like to say a little bit about myself, although Justin mentioned a few things. I'm originally from Ecuador. I was born in Quito, Ecuador. I grew up there. I did my undergrad in Universidad Austral de Chile in the south of Chile, in Valdivia, a very nice town. Then I went back to Ecuador, where I worked for 5 years in the forest industry. And then I went to do my master's, and I transferred to a PhD at UBC in Vancouver. And you may be wondering how I ended up in teaching, and I think it's because teaching has always been part of my life. I had been a high school teacher. I always liked tutoring. I was always a teaching assistant, so that evolved naturally into a teaching career. And I finished my PhD in 2012, and I started teaching immediately there. As Justin mentioned, quite a few different courses. I was in that early stage of my career where I was just teaching anything that was available for me to teach, and that was a remarkable experience because I got to really learn about different topics. The courses that you see in bold are the ones that I'm actually teaching, but the other ones have been the list of courses that I have been involved with. So it's been a really nice journey to get to where I'm at now in the Faculty of Forestry at UBC. It's beautiful because I get to merge these two passions. I have a passion for forests, I have a passion for trees, and I also have a passion for teaching and learning. So that's been a dream come true for me. Today we will talk a little bit about the background, about humor in education, about how this situation came to be for me personally, which I think an interesting story. We will talk about the types of humor and their benefits in the educational context. We will go through a brief review of the humorous resources that I have been using that have been working well in my courses. I'll also share some student feedback, not only about how pleased they were with using humor in the classroom, but also how humor was contagious, and they also expressed some of that humor in the assignments and in the classroom. We'll also talk about some challenges. Nothing is completely easy these days, so we'll go through that. And then I'll propose some reflection questions to open up conversation at the end. I really think that this presentation won't be too long. I want to leave some time for us to have a chat at the end. So what I want people to do now is there's two ways of joining this anonymous poll. So it's completely anonymous. You could go to menti.com if you have used this app, probably with your phone. It's good. It's really handy. Menti.com. I don't know if you see the code there, and type the code, or you could also scan the QR code directly with your phone. So I would like to ask these questions. As I mentioned, it's completely anonymous. We don't get a track of who's answering what, so feel free to go through those questions. So I'll give you some time to do that. I see two people have already submitted their answers. I hope this app works pretty well today. And there will be a couple more polls coming up, but I'll leave some time for people to answer this question. How valuable do you think humor is in education? So you can think of yourself as a learner and let me know if you value humor. We'll give you some time. We have 14, 15 people submitting their answers. We have 68 attendees, so that's fantastic. I'm really, really happy. And then I'll show the results, so don't worry. I just hide the results until we get a few people submitting, so that we're not biased with what we see in the screen. All right, when we hit 30, I'll show the results. And you can keep voting even if I show the results. That's totally fine. So almost there. Okay, I'll just show the results. Okay, so perfect. And I put both in-person courses and online courses because I was curious to see the difference, because my experience adding laugh tracks in the pre-recorded videos is mostly entirely actually in an online environment. So it's still up there, 8.1 for in-person and a bit lower for online courses. So that's interesting, but I think both are high. But some people, and that is perfectly normal, prefer to for the academic setting to be a bit more serious, and I totally understand that. All right, so let's go through another poll. I'll go to the next slide. And this one is asking, if you're a teacher, how much do you use humor in your courses? So this would be particularly targeted to educators. So you should now see in your device, you should see this question now. And you can start submitting. I'll hide the results just for a bit so that we see the scores at the end. So I don't know how many of the attendees are teachers now, but we'll see. All right, I'll just show the results. Okay, so this is a bit hard to quantify because it's a scale from 1 to 10, almost nothing, to they're like a comedy show. So the average is right in the middle, and I think that most people use a little bit of humor in their classes, so that's great. You can also see the distribution of the answers, so it's quite interesting. I love this app. All right, perfect. So let's move on to the next one. And what I want you to do now is list 3 aspects of learning that may be enhanced by the use of humor in teaching. So if there's humor in the classroom, what can improve for the students? So you can maybe write 1 or 2 words, maybe keep it relatively short because this will be a word cloud. But I'm interested in knowing, what do you think humor has an effect on? So what are aspects of learning that could be enhanced by the use of humor? So let's see, this requires a bit of typing, but keep it short, please. And I'll show the results in a bit as well. The word cloud is being formed now, so that's great. Okay, I think we'll show this, and you can keep entering the words if you need to. This is great. Okay, engagement, absolutely. Attention, very good. Retention, less intimidating, I see somewhere there. Openness, belonging, excellent. This is great. Motivation, attention span, excellent. Breaking the ice, boost interactions. Awesome. You're pretty much covering everything that I found in the literature that was mentioned as aspects that can be improved by the use of humor. Local history, comfort, excellent. Fantastic. I love these word clouds. All right. So that was a bit of an introduction for you to connect with the idea of using humor in online learning and in learning in general, of course. So I'll keep going. And I'll now shift to telling you a bit of how was this a personal experience for me. How did I end up using laugh tracks in pre-recorded lectures? It seems like a crazy idea. So the first thing that happened is a pandemic. At the time I was teaching several courses in both UBC and SFU, and obviously we all know how this hit us really hard. And then we were told, this was March, so just finish the term in emergency mode, do the best you can, don't worry too much, everyone understands each other, we are compassionate and sympathetic, students are understanding with professors, professors understanding with students, and this is what we were told to do. And it wasn't too long, in a month the term was over, we had to do online exams, we had to make some shifts, learn how to use Zoom, but it was doable, and everyone expected us to perform at the best that we could, but nobody was asking for too much, so it wasn't really too hard. I like that meme that appeared at that time, which I think reflects a bit on how we actually did it. But then the summer came, and from my experience teaching that last portion of the regular term in April, and March and April, is that humor does not work well online. I kept my humorous interactions via Zoom. It was a completely different experience. It wasn't really nice because I would crack a joke and nobody laughs. You can't really see the reaction of the audience. It was awkward to me. It was, oh, this is not working. I remember one time I saw a couple of LOLs and ha-has in the chat, but I saw it later after I make the joke. So it wasn't really something that worked well. I also discovered that I had a serious trouble recording myself. It was something I did not want to venture in, and it was forced upon us. And the first time I had to pre-record a lecture, it was incredibly awkward. I spent 2 hours and produced only 2 minutes of recording because it was not my thing. So I thought at that point that not only I will suffer, but students will be even in a worse situation because they will be going through all these courses online, sitting in front of the screen without any interactions with other human beings. in the fall, in the upcoming fall after the pandemic, I would have 500 students in 3 courses and only a few months to prepare. So I was like in complete despair. I thought if this is this may be the end. I'm not sure I would be able to adapt. And even though I am not tech savvy, but I'm not too bad with technology. But even then, I was feeling really hopeless that this would work. And then if teaching was going to be like that, then I was in trouble. I was in some sort of a personal crisis. And then one night I thought, well, I'll solve the humor problem with putting the laugh tracks. This was an idea that came in 1 second, and it gave me the excitement to actually do it. And then I'll mention everything that happened after that, and the experiences I got with that really simple technique, that really simple idea really saved my day because it made it fun, not only to put the laugh tracks, but hours would go by with me editing the videos, and I was having fun putting the laugh track in the right place. It was really interesting. And then I said, well, why not only the laugh tracks? I would want to make it humorous in general. So I'll talk to you about some other humorous ideas that we introduced in this online environment that we have actually kept in the in-person environment. Obviously not the laugh tracks when we are teaching in the classroom, but many of these techniques have remained in our learning management systems, and the contents remain like that. And so the humor was very, very well received. So in my teaching evaluations of those courses, I got really, really nice comments. Some of the ones you can see there, these are extracted from the Natural Sciences Education article that was actually the next step after that. So humor was well received. I read these in the evaluations, and then a scientific publication came out of this. It's not a full research exercise in which we had an experimental design. We will talk about that as well at the end, but it was an article that allowed me to tell this experience that I'm now summarizing for you in this webinar. And so this article also came to be thanks to a colleague in the Faculty of Forestry, Maya Kursic, who said there's a special edition of a natural sciences education issue about these experiences. So I think that will fit well, and it did. It took a while to write the article, but I'm really glad I did. And so through that article, I actually learned after the fact about the different types of humor, because I didn't implement humor in my courses with an academic background, with reading the literature about it. I just did it intuitively with what I thought was appropriate. So it was really interesting to actually put some names to what I had been doing in my classes. And so one of the important things to learn when you apply humor in education is the types of humor. The most important differentiation is between content-related and content-unrelated humor. So content-related, obviously, directly related to what you're talking about, to the theory of the courses you are teaching, and content unrelated could be just a funny anecdote about daily life, about yourself, about something that is not related to content, but also enlightens the atmosphere in the course. There's also self-disparaging versus aggressive humor. Self-disparaging is when you make fun of yourself, and aggressive is when you make fun of the students. I don't use aggressive humor in my courses. I avoid it at all means, but it exists. And some articles that I cite in my publication actually determine that there are some benefits even to aggressive humor, but it's too risky as well. And there's obviously spontaneous versus planned humor. I have to say that most of the humor when I'm teaching in person is kind of spontaneous. It's not really that planned, and it also ties to your mood of the day, which I'll also talk about at the very end. And these were some of the effects of humor in education that I found in the different articles in the literature, and many of these words actually are similar to the ones you put in the word cloud. So it's quite interesting. So this is just a list. It increases enjoyment. Who doesn't really enjoy a good laugh? Reduces boredom, enhances attention and engagement. Those words were mentioned actually in the word cloud. Facilitates retention, so people tend to not forget about a really funny thing. They may even tell it to their peers after the classroom happened. It produces a less stressful learning atmosphere, improves teacher-student relationships, promotes creativity, augments the sense of belonging to class, increases learning speed, elevates motivation, provokes thought. This is all from the literature. And finally, it improves performance. So there had been studies, they're not really that common because it's really hard to think of an experimental design to isolate all these factors, but there's solid evidence that it actually does improve student performance, in other words, pretty much grades. So these are, I think, enough ideas, enough uh, factors to encourage us to use a bit more humor in the classroom. Now, what I want the audience to do is watch a video where I show some of these jokes. I just collected some of the jokes of these 3 courses where I recorded the lectures, and I selected these different jokes, not necessarily the best jokes, I just got a compilation of jokes. So you can do that by scanning that code. If I can ask a moderator to also put the link in the chat, which may be handy. What I'll do is I'll mute myself. It's a 6-minute video that is really important to these webinars, so people can watch the video in their own devices, because if we play it through the system, it won't be as high quality. So I really would appreciate if people can watch that video where you can actually see the types of jokes that I make in the pre-recorded videos. The video has an introduction dedicated to my mother. Unfortunately, I lost my mother to cancer that year, that very same year that I was recording this video. So I made a tribute to her, because it was a mix of feelings and a very sometimes difficult thing to put jokes when we were going through that loss. But my mom actually gave me the encouragement to do it, and I think she would be enjoying this. So I'll mute myself for 6 minutes while people watch the video, and we'll come back exactly in 6 minutes. All right, so please go ahead and let us know in the chat if you can't open it or something, but it should be good to go. Okay, so how's it going? I think we should be done with the video. Can people maybe mention in the chat if we have finished with the video? Is it all good? Okay, I assume everything is good. So we will continue. So this was the essence of what I did when I was teaching online. As you can see, those laugh tracks go in different places, and I took some time to make sure that the laugh track matches the joke. The timing was really critical as well, so it took a while, but it was a lot of fun. Another thing that we had, I'll now mention some other humorous resources that we have included. So some funny distractors in quizzes, for example, are quite interesting. Some people mention that these are not really good pedagogically speaking, because they will distract students, but I don't use them that much, but in some cases they allow you to connect and create a story about something. So for example, in this quiz question, identify the false statement, there's this one about Mariah Carey and Luis Miguel. They did in the past, they did, so it's not the right answer. And Luis Miguel is one of my favorite artists, so I keep talking about Luis Miguel in the course, and that makes it easy to make a connection with the students. and then you can keep using those. So an advantage of the systematic sampling method is that Mariah Carey and Luis Miguel adored it. And then students, these are low-stake quizzes also, so they're not like a midterm question or a final exam question. And I think students appreciate some lightness in the contents of the course. These one at the end shows actually the right answer. An advantage of the systematic sampling method is that it theoretically covers the entire population evenly, especially spatially. So we mentioned that that sounds funny, and students appreciate that. This is another example. Which from below are examples of hydrologic models? Mark all that apply. And one of the options is Angelina Jolie when she was the United Nations representative of the Global Water Relief Program. I have to say that many of these answers were created by my TAs as well. So some of the quizzes we worked together in creating these questions, and then they also caught up with this humorous style. Then another one says the student with the highest score in the midterm, you know, the hydrologic model, because this was a hydrology course as well. Another example of how the TAs were also encouraged on their own. It's not that I told them, please use humor in everything you do, but they did on their own. So this was one of our TAs, Robbie, who sent this announcement saying, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. A time zone joke, which was an issue at that point, and the Truman Show joke, if you have watched that. Then he tells students to refresh a pivot table in Excel, and then he says, and after clicking refresh, you can say, ah. And so these are things that make them laugh a little bit. They're not extremely amusing or extremely hilarious, but it is the sum of these lighthearted instances using humor that makes the difference. Memes are really good. Memes are really interesting, and they typically allow us to do some content related jokes like this, like the ones you see. There's a lot for statistics and the normal distribution, as you can see there. So these are funny. Students really enjoy those. Now let's talk about student feedback. I was surprised to see that students also got in the humorous mood. So this is a question, and it's a statistics question, your acute null hypothesis. Who looks after its own interests? A researcher appears to disturb your piece and test your veracity. Would you prefer the researcher to run a two-tailed or one-tailed test on you? Justify your answer briefly. So that was my quiz question, and then these were some student responses. Brilliant. I would prefer a cute little one-tailed test because then the researcher would have a lower probability of rejecting me, a cute null hypothesis, and thus their punishment for disturbing my piece will be the lack of evidence to support their claim. So very quite brilliant answer, which made us all laugh. Another example here, two-tailed, since the researcher disturbed my piece, they deserve to suffer the extra step it takes to divide alpha by half. So amazing responses. So these were really, really good. This was an interesting lab question. If a Feller bunch has a 1% chance of not working, should say there, on any given day, and you already have 3, is it worth buying a 4th one? And a student responded, is not really, because only out of one out of 1,000 days, none would work. But the contractor is looking, if the contractor is looking to buy this one, then he should do it regardless of his financial responsibilities. And look at these beautiful feather bunches. So, and students uploaded these photos and so on. So it was really, really nice to see. When I was under the peer review of my article, one of the peer reviewers suggested really nicely, and he or she had a good point there to try to quantify how humor was received in the courses. So what I did is looked at all the open-ended anonymous comments in the student evaluations and count the words that evoked something like humor, like fun, funny, humor, humorous, joke, hilarious, comic. And so I counted those, and roughly a quarter of the comments had a direct reference to humor. And here you have some, you can check them out in the article, but this was the way to kind of evaluate if humor was well received. Interestingly, in one of the articles that I reviewed for the literature review of my own article, someone made a poll, and there's about 3% of people who do not like humor in an educational setting. They just said, please avoid it. I don't enjoy it. And in all of these comments, I did get one of those comments that the laugh tracks are a distraction and the laugh tracks are no good, and the course would improve if we just avoid the laugh tracks. But it's obviously a minority, but we respect those opinions as well, of course. Some of the challenges in implementing humor, not only online but in person, is mood changes, especially in person. So I'm not always funny. I'm not always in the mood to make jokes. Sometimes I go through the lecture and barely crack any joke, and I think that should be fine. But it takes some energy to keep the humorous style up there. So that's not always possible. Efforts are required to develop clever content-related humorous elements. So this is the trickiest part. Some of the contents that we teach, it's hard to find a funny instance for some of the theories we cover. So it's good that we have memes online, so you sometimes find some really good things. But it takes time, it takes effort, it takes creativity to do that. There's obviously a risk with humor of being unfunny. It has happened. I have had situations where I crack a joke in class and nobody really laughs, and then you have to move on after that awkward silence. In an online environment with the laugh tracks is easier because even a joke that is not so funny, you put the laugh track and then it becomes really funny. Just the laugh track is funny on its own. And another one is reaching universality. We are increasingly teaching in multicultural settings with people from so many different backgrounds and cultures and languages. Sometimes things are lost in translation as well. So I was really happy when I showed that video to one of my colleagues, and he wrote an email back saying, I was pretty nervous when you sent me this. As one thing I have learned is that a lot of humor does not travel. If you don't believe me, try singing Monty Python's Lumberjack song at the Truck Rocker Conference. You can Google that later if you wish. However, what you have done here is clearly international humor. So he congratulated me, and that was good to know, because it's always a risk that some part of the audience just doesn't find that funny. And with this colleague, we had a lot of discussions afterwards about how different cultures perceive humor in completely different ways, and so that is something that is tricky to do as well. And some questions for reflections. A last Menti poll for you. If people can please participate. The code is there again. It's the same deck of slides. So if you can scan that, and I'll hide the results. What I ask here is, would you like to see more humor used in education and academia in general? Not only in the classroom setting, but in academia, the way we write, the materials we use, the way we conduct meetings. Sometimes I feel that academia is very tight and not so humorous. So that is my personal opinion, but if people can participate in that, that would be really great. Remember, these are anonymous. So I'll give you some time to complete that poll. And I'll show the results. All right, so the majority, so 8.1 would be the average of all people who have responded. So I think in general there's a positive. So one of the things I concluded from my experience in using humor in education is that there's space for it. And even though some people may not enjoy it as much, in one of the articles I read for the review, They also say that humor at its worst is harmless, right? So I think most people would appreciate that. Okay. And some questions for reflection for us to have a discussion, a conversation after this is what experimental design would we need to quantify the benefits of using humor? So I had not been able to do that in before I published the article, but we could, and there's other studies which have actually done that, but it's something to think about because it's quite difficult to isolate. But what most researchers have done is to release a version of the course, one section of the course without any humor, and the other one with as much humor as possible. And then they have reported the benefits of humor. So it has been quantified, but it's not really that common. Like you don't find a lot of studies actually measuring this. And the ones that are published, they also acknowledge limitations in isolating these factors, right? Another one is how to improve the quality of humorous content. It's relatively easy to crack a silly joke about daily life, but we want more significant, meaningful, pedagogical, content-related humorous elements. How to maintain high levels of humorous energy in the classroom is also something I just mentioned. It's not always easy. And also, can the sense of humor be improved? Can one really develop this as if you want to prepare for a marathon and you don't, you're not really a runner, but then you train and then you go through a half marathon and then you finish a full marathon? Is humor something that we can cultivate, that we can actually improve? So those are some of the things that I always think about when thinking about humor in the classroom. I would like to thank a few people. First, Maya, who actually brought this opportunity for me to, she gave me the idea to publish this article, so that went well. I also want to thank John Innes. He was the dean at the time we went through the pandemic, and Rob Kozak was the associate dean. So Rob had to deal with a lot of the issues in switching to online learning, and the support from the dean's office was just remarkable. And finally, Michelle Seng, she's our tech marvel at forestry, at UBC Forestry, and she's just fantastic with helping with anything related to software that we have used for editing the software, the videos, and so on. So I also would like to thank Natural Sciences Education and this webinar, and Emily, who has been great inviting me here, and everyone involved. So that ends my presentation, and I hope we have some time for addressing some questions.
All right, Andres, we'll see if we can get some questions going here. A few people have sent in questions, and a lot of them I feel that you addressed in your talk. So you did a good job of anticipating what people might want to know. Humor's tricky. It's really easy to offend people with humor. What are some things you can do to lower that risk that's inherent in telling jokes?
I never use anything that is remotely related to anything related to the students. For example, I never mention anything related to the students. Whenever I use content unrelated humor, it is always self-disparaging. It typically makes fun of myself. So it's just a matter of being really careful of what you say. I'll give you one example. In the video, I mentioned these, we are going through different forest products, and what is the disadvantage of paper, right? So I say there that one disadvantage is that people can write stupid things on paper, right? So that's not directed to anyone in particular. It's just so vague and so broad that I don't think anyone would be offended by that. But that's as far as I go. So I think at the end we have to be very, very careful about not mentioning anything related to any particular condition of any sort. Like in Latin America, for example, we have rivalries between countries, for example, and we make fun of, Ecuadorians and Peruvians. So I would never, that would be fine in a meeting in your house, but I would never make any reference to that sort of thing, for example. So yeah, just a lot of care into making the jokes as general as possible so that they cannot be directed to someone.
So two really good questions that are kind of related to each other. The first one, what are your thoughts on inserting humor into talks at academic meetings when you're giving a scientific presentation?
I would support that 100%. I think the times I've been in conferences, it's sometimes really hard to follow because scientific presentations tend to be so specific and so into the methods, and so it seems that they are mostly directed towards specialists in the same area. So maybe introducing humor like that would be a step to forward. I would start by making scientific presentations a bit more digestible for the general public, right? So that they understand what it's all about. And then inserting a bit of humor here and there, I think it always makes people laugh, and it is always appreciated. And those are the things that people remember at the end. So if I go to a conference and I go through these long talks and someone makes one of those humorous, those are the ones that you will be talking about. Those are the ones that you will be telling people about. So I'm in general supportive of trying to use humor as much as we can.
Well, many people have an extension appointment and someone asks a question about use of humor in like a field day situation where you're giving a presentation where there may be a bunch of farmers who tend to be older in the crowd. How would you implement humor in that situation?
It's always tricky because we always need to understand the audience. But I again go back to what I said before, which is make the jokes as general and harmless as possible so that anyone would laugh. Because once you try to direct it to a certain cohort of people, then you get in risky territory because that joke can also be offensive, right? You may think it's funny, but it's not. So again, try to keep the jokes as universal as possible.
I
It
think
wouldn't
that's
custom tailor those.
I think that's the real risk when any kind of humor, you got to make sure it's not offensive. And I liked the normal distribution versus paranormal distribution because that's
Yeah.
on topic, that's low risk, no one's offended. I find that whenever I have a chance to implement some humor, I try to make it kind of work it into the class in some
Mm.
way. I was just one day, just kind of spur of the moment, giving a discussion, a talk to a group of students about oligopolies. Oligopolies are
Right.
hard,
Yeah.
it's hard to break into an oligopoly market. The automotive industry is a great example. And then I say that's why I'm really impressed with the Tesla company because they managed to break in, and the big three hasn't stopped them from getting into the market. And I throw in the
Yep.
joke, that Teslas don't have a new car smell.
Yeah.
They do have a strange musk though.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That makes sense.
yeah,
And
strange musk.
that's also a great content related example. It's
And when I first told that joke in class, it was completely spontaneous. I just thought of the joke and I'd heard the joke obviously somewhere else and told it.
yeah.
And it made for a fantastic day in the classroom. So
Yeah.
everyone walked out remembering that. We ended on that note. On that note, we'll see you next time, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And I have had a couple of no, I wouldn't call them complaints, but there were a couple of memes that some people did not like and they didn't find it appropriate, and I respectfully disagree. I don't really use them more. Like I avoid those memes that to me are inoffensive, but some other people find that inappropriate. But it was nothing that I got into trouble with. I just was made aware that uh, that could be problematic for some people, and that's fine. And then
another question from the chat. What are some things that surprised you as you were attempting to add humor to the class?
Some things that surprised me. I was surprised at how well how easy it was to implement the laugh tracks, for example. It was fun. It was easy. We have software. We use Camtasia for that. It was really fun to do. I spent sometimes quite a few minutes putting the laugh track in the right place because sometimes if you it's a fraction of a second thing, right? If you
Hmm.
put it slightly here and there, then the whole thing is destroyed. So also using the right laugh track for the right jokes. So some jokes are more hilarious than others. So some require a soft laughter, some required, and some jokes had some uh, continuation. So I was talking about something, and then it's still funny. I had sometimes had to edit the laugh tracks themselves to match the joke. So that took a while, but it was fun to do, and I was surprised to see how well they were received. Because I didn't tell the students at the beginning of the courses, and you know what? Watch my videos, and they have laugh tracks. I just post the videos, and then I start seeing comments here and there in the discussion board. Did you see the laugh track? Oh my God, it has laugh tracks. Oh, how fun is this? So I never thought that it would be well received, so well received. I knew it was gonna be nice, but not to the point of it was really, really fun for people.
Another thing that I tried to try to add some humor in an online class, an agricultural finance course, I named the business that was in the balance sheet, and the balance sheet was the year ending 1999, and the name of the business was the Prince Rogers Nelson Farm. And that is Prince, the musician's real name. And of course, 1999, the famous song Party Like It's 1999. They
Oh,
didn't get it.
yeah.
I went right over their head. And that's the thing I'm struggling with now. Now that I've gotten old, all of my pop culture references are from before they were born. So how do you handle that when you have that generational divide?
Uh, again, it's tricky. I think not all jokes have to reach everyone. So if a couple laugh really hard because they get it, then that's also fine. I had the same situation with this Truman that I showed in the slides. The Truman, I
Yes.
didn't get it when my TA posted it, so I have to go watch the excerpt of the movie to and then it was funny, right? So I don't think with those types of jokes will reach everyone, but if you reach a couple, that's fine. And again, trying to make the jokes more universal is good. But if you have a really clever joke that it will be more limited, then that's also fine. I don't see a problem with that, and maybe then people will research that and then they will find it funny and learn something new about the joke you made, right?
Your grasp of the spoken English is fantastic, but there's not everyone's is, and we get students that don't speak English as a primary language. How do we handle language barriers?
That's also that's also difficult. And I would even argue that the language barrier is not as important as the cultural barrier. I tried to make the jokes as simple as possible. Like again, the one I showed you. People can write stupid things on paper, or the one about the metric system. Like I don't like the metric system. Let's change this to meters and things like that that most people will understand. But it's the cultural barrier that is most important. It's hard to sometimes appreciate humor from other cultures because you just don't get it. I remember even when I was a kid watching America's Funniest Home Videos. I laughed through the whole thing because the videos are funny, but the videos that the audience selected as the funniest, to me, it was the least funny. It's like this is a cultural difference. It's how Americans appreciate humor. It's different, right?
We've got a great question here. Someone asking for where do you find your jokes slash memes, etc. Is there a good resource that you can share?
I don't have like a centralized uh, uh, single stop place for finding these things. They're all over the internet. With the memes, you have to be careful to confirm that they're copyright free. Some memes actually are copyrighted, so some have been floating around for ages and nobody can track their origin either. But I think it's a case-by-case basis. I don't really have a source. There's also multiple websites for you to download the laugh tracks themselves,
Mhm.
many for free, so it's not an expensive thing to do. But it also depends on the subject matter you're teaching. So memes for statistics are easy to find because stats is everywhere, and introductory statistics, the normal curve. For some other courses, it might take some more time, and it may take creativity, so that you are the one who has to create those. Um,
There are easy ways to create memes. I think Image Flip is the website that will have just a large library of memes. You can add the top text and the bottom text.
mhm.
I've done that a little bit myself, not much for classes, but for other things. So
Yeah.
you can just go make your own memes, easy enough. Takes just a few minutes. One thing that I do is if I'm browsing around the web, I'm on Twitter, TikTok, whatever the place may be, and I see something funny, I grab a screenshot or download or save the video and email it to myself.
Yeah.
Not very efficient. It takes a lot of time, but it's a way to store them and then they're in the email so I can find them at some point. Someone had a technical question. They noticed that you were using a green screen and they asked how you pulled that off. Did you have an actual physical green screen? And one thing I noticed when you were doing your green screen work, you didn't have that weird green halo around you that sometimes you
Mhm.
get with a green screen. Camtasia was mentioned earlier. It's great editing software, really easy to use.
Yeah.
So if you're new to editing, Camtasia is the way to go. It does have the ability to remove a background color. So what
Yeah.
did you do for that? Did you have like your white background behind you or what?
I have my green screen right here, so I'll pull it
Oh,
down, and there we go. So
there you
that's it.
go.
But you see, I appear more pinkish now. Did you
Oh, you do, don't you?
Yeah, because the webcam
Adjust the
white
colors.
balance adjusts, but there's I didn't have any issues with it. But yeah, this is the green screen that I use. So where I'm sitting now is exactly where I recorded. It's a small room, and it was just I had to cover the windows, and I do have a not professional but semi-professional light
Right.
to make that happen. The reason I'm looking pinkish is because this light is just regular light bulb, so I have a white light so it was a really easy setup and very inexpensive as well.
All right then. I don't think there are any more questions except ones that were very similar to that have already been asked. So I think if Emily is around, we'll pass it back over to Emily and let Emily wrap the show up. There she is. Wrap us up, Emily.
All right, thank you to everyone today for joining us in this webinar. Thank you to Dr. Varhola for sharing your research, and thank you to Justin for moderating the discussion. We hope you found the topic interesting and encourage you to view the full article published in Natural Sciences Education. As a reminder, the recording will be made available and sent to all attendees soon. We encourage you to also fill out the short survey after the webinar has concluded. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you
Goodbye.
so much. Take care. Thank you.